global sources has more updated stuff, because they're also kind of a feedback car, the point system, so we can understand which supplier gave better service.
Global Sources app, I know there's plenty of the others out there. It's the one I've used for the longest. It's the one I'm most comfortable with. It's the one where you can ask direct questions and get good answers.
Now it's much simpler with the app. That's appreciated.
If we were talking about website, good usability, really knowing what their customer is looking for, having a lot of information.
Happy anniversary for Global Sources' 30th year. Amazing stuff. Keep it going.
Happy 30th anniversary to Global Sources Online.
Happy birthday, Global Sources.
Happy 30th anniversary to Global Sources.
Happy 30th anniversary, Global Sources.
Happy anniversary.
Happy birthday, Global Sources.
Happy anniversary, Global Sources Online.
Happy anniversary, Global Sources Online.
Good afternoon from Hong Kong, or indeed good morning or good evening, depending on where you're watching this. And welcome to the latest Global Sources live webinar, the ESG Imperative. My name is Tom, and I will be your host and MC for today's webinar. And we have two excellent expert speakers joining us to give presentations on the ESG topics of the day, to share their insights and to answer your questions as well. First of all, though, I should explain the context of what's going on here. This year, 2025, is the 30th anniversary of Global Sources Online, GSOL, as we like to refer to it for short around the office. Global Sources Online was a pioneering B2B sourcing platform. It was the first of its kind when it was launched, and it remained the only one of its kind for some time. And it revolutionized international trade, being the first kind of international sourcing platform that you could get online. Since its launch, it's remained at the forefront of digital innovation, connecting buyers and suppliers across global markets. And it is quite amazing if you look at the very first edition of what was essentially a directory website and how it has evolved into the multi-platform sourcing thing that it is today. But it's not my job to promote Global Sources Online and its many excellent features for you right now. Although, of course, open another tab and check them out if you want to while we're here. The other active factor in today's webinar is the Sourcing Elite Board, the SEB for short. We like an acronym for Global Sources. It was established in 2022, and the Sourcing Elite Board is kind of a collaborative initiative. It's dedicated to advancing the sourcing industry through the sharing of expertise and innovative strategies And the membership are drawn from senior executives, from buying offices, retailers, brands, and so on. It's kind of an invitation-only community, and it holds events and shares resources across the world. And that's what this webinar is all part of. Now, let's see, what do I need to do next on the running order? Oh, yes, a little bit of background on our two speakers. So, first of all, giving the first presentation today, we'll meet them shortly, but I want to give you a bit of a background so you can get excited about what you're in for. First of all, we will have Richard Lin, who is project leader of the Institute for Climate and Carbon Neutrality at the University of Hong Kong. He's the leader specifically of the Hong Kong government-funded project facilitating environmental, social, and governance compliance in supply chain management for, actually I need to read this off the screen, for Hong Kong invested manufacturing enterprises. So that's got to focus on developing carbon management and carbon border adjustment mechanism guidelines, and we'll be covering that in some more detail later on. Richard is also the managing director and active member of Gruen Denken Limited, I think I've pronounced that right, which is a think tank and consulting firm that specializes in carbon management and sustainability reporting and compliance. So as you can tell from that brief intro that has only skimmed the surface, Richard Lin is very much a person with the kind of expertise that we need today. Our second speaker and friend of the show, so to speak, is who's participated in Global Sources seminars before, is Valerio D'Angelo, director of Aroca Group. Now, Valerio has over 15 years of public affairs and international business strategy experience with consumer goods, and that's across Europe and Asia. He's held senior roles in a number of Fortune 500 companies, most recently with the toy and entertainment behemoth Hasbro, a name I'm sure that all of you have heard. And there he was responsible for the public affairs, driving that agenda as the regional government and regulatory affairs lead. And he's also played a key role in multi-million-dollar commercial launches and driving the sustainability agenda throughout Asia. So a different angle on today's topic, but again, someone with a deep and expansive expertise in the burning ESG topics of the day. Now, I'm sure you're eager to meet both of those fine gentlemen, but before we do that, I want to give you a quick heads up about the format of the webinar as well. So we will have presentations, one after the other, each from Richard and Valerio. And after that, we're going to have a Q&A session where if you've got any specific queries, perhaps you have something that is related to you and your business directly that you want to ask a specific question about, or perhaps there's something that's mentioned during one of the presentations that you'd like the speaker to expand on a little bit or give some more explanation. You can ask those questions at any time during the webinar. If you look on your interface, I'm not sure, depending on what you're viewing on, will depend on where that box is, but it should say Q&A, and you can type your question at any time during the webinar, and it will appear and be kind of kept in a question repository that I can see and that both of our speakers can see as well. So don't worry about holding onto your question until the very end. Rather, write it down as soon as you think of it, and we will collect them. And then in the Q&A session, we will address as many of them as we can before our time runs out. Speaking of the very end, there's another thing that you should be aware of, and I think we've got a couple of slides to illustrate this. Yes, there we go. Attendees who stay for 60 minutes of the webinar, and the time you've already spent watching this does count, will earn 500 Sourcing Club points. So they'll be credited to your globalsources.com account shortly after the webinar. I'm not entirely sure quite when. And you can use that for a number of things. And then there will be a QR code shown on screen at the end of the webinar as well. And the first 20 buyers who have attended the whole thing and complete that survey can get $10 Amazon coupon. Don't be too quick to go to the next slide, Producer Lewis. Okay, if you could take that slide away, thanks. All right, so I have rattled on enough now for the intro, and just between you and me doing a bit of a long intro also allows a few more people to sneak into the webinar, and don't think I didn't see the numbers ticking up. About 25 of you missed the start. That's okay, because now we're going to meet our panelists, our speakers. And I think first of all, we're going to speaker number one. Let's bring on Richard Lynn. Richard, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, Tom. Hello.
Hi,
Hello,
Richard. Good
everyone.
afternoon. Yes, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. How are you doing, Richard?
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. And where are you calling us from today?
So I'm calling from Shenzhen today. I'm in Shenzhen. Yeah.
Okay. So not too far away from our Hong Kong office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If viewers, if you're not familiar completely with the geography of southern China, so Shenzhen and Hong Kong are basically right next to each other. You could, in theory, you
Yes.
could walk, but in practice, nobody would. So that's it's good to have you with us. Now, Richard, I've give a very kind of superficial introduction to you and your background, but perhaps you could introduce a little bit for the viewers, maybe some of the work you do, well, particularly for the University of Hong Kong, but also your other endeavors in the ESG field. Maybe give us a sense of what you're working on at the moment and have done recently.
So for the time being, actually, I have been assisting the Hong Kong government to build the carbon management guideline for Hong Kong manufacturing companies in Asia Pacific. I think in the very near future, I think carbon will be one of the most important mechanism across the globe, and there will be carbon pricing coming in. So enterprises will need to be careful about that, and we need to make sufficient preparation before that era coming. Yeah.
Yes, don't wait for it to become a problem. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. We have a sort of Regulations 101 slide that I think if we can bring that on screen, thank you. So this really is basic, but there are two key EU regulations that are sort of as with many EU regulations, it's hard to say when they have and haven't definitively started happening. But the two that are most on people's agenda at the moment are CBAM, that's the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. That's effective from January 2026, so pretty soon. And that places a carbon price, as you mentioned, Richard, on certain imported goods, basically taxing the carbon emissions that are caused during production or like throughout the supply chain, and that's to encourage cleaner production. Whereas the CSDDD, I'm trying to make CS triple D a thing, but nobody seems to be joining me. So CSDDD seems to be what everyone says, and that seeks to enhance corporate responsibility and requires companies to assess and address human rights and environmental impact within their supply chain. That's the very basics, but Richard, maybe you can expand a little bit on that and tell us about. I know, for example, there's been some moving around of the deadlines for when certain fees and taxes become relevant. Could you introduce that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think these two of course I will get down to details in a minute, but these two regulations, they are two cross-border systems. They will have real impacts on enterprises across the globe. And when it comes to global trade measures, please bear in mind that if one jurisdiction have this type of policy, I think the other jurisdiction will also consider similar policy. That's also why one of my observations is that I think a lot of jurisdictions will try to adopt carbon pricing for imports of goods in the coming years. That will be a big trend for the coming years. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Well, I look forward to you diving into that in more detail very shortly. And let's also bring on and say hello to our second panelist today, Valerio D'Angelo. Valerio, I can see your thumbnail. Good afternoon. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Tom. Good afternoon, Richard. And good afternoon, everybody.
Yes, we do have a sizable audience at this point. And yeah, Valerio, where are you joining us from today? I think last time you were in Italy. How about today?
I'm in Hong Kong today, so back home.
Very nice. So we're all in the same time zone. So we're all in the same headspace. That's great. Similarly for you, Valeria, I gave a criminally brief introduction to you, but could you perhaps kind of talk a bit about your work in the ESG sphere to give a bit of background to the audience?
No, absolutely. First of all, thanks a lot for the kind introduction. We, as Tom mentioned, with Arocca Group, a public affairs firm, we assist Fortune 500 company in addressing the opportunities and the challenges in the context of ESG, mainly focused on the sustainability front. And also I want to echo what Richard mentioned about the jurisdiction adopting certain policy. I totally agree with Richard. We live in an exciting time, and you will see in the presentation. Maybe we'll touch more in more detail. I mean, this is the moment where most of the jurisdiction, I mean, a different speed, a different pace, they're moving towards a similar goal. It will take years to have an homogeneous type of standards and regulation, but that's clearly the right direction. So spot on, Richard.
All right. Well, I'm glad to know that you're both on the singing from the same hymn sheet, as the saying goes, but roughly in the same place. Well, that's excellent, and I don't want to delay getting into the meat of this webinar too much longer. However, I do want to reiterate, especially again, because people still sneaking into this webinar, do stick around and know that there is a Q&A session at the end after our two presentations, and you can type your questions in and send them to the panelists at any time using the Q&A box below. And also there will be a survey that you can complete at the very end very quickly to get yourself an Amazon coupon and some Sourcing Club points. Quick look at my rundown, and I think that's it. Let's have Richard please take it away and share with us on the impact in the Asia Pacific region of EU sustainability compliance rules.
Thank you, Tom. I think you can see my screen okay, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Let's get started. So my name is Richard Lin, and today we will be discussing a critical topic, the new wave of EU sustainability compliance rules and what they mean for all of us as manufacturers or traders. They are not just distant regulations, they have a direct impact on our business. So before we start, I will give you a brief introduction of my personal viewpoint on sustainability, right? To understand these complex EU regulations, we need to start with the concept of understanding each other. In sustainability things, it is quite often that things will look contradictory or opposite to each other. Here you see two Chinese characters. They literally mean two people standing in the opposite directions face to face. It does not mean one is right and the other is wrong, or one is true, the other is false. It is neutral. They just have different perspectives and they can both be true. So that is the mindset that you should have when you make a decision on sustainability stuff. That will give you more information to understand the full picture, to avoid costly misunderstandings. So now let's move on to the real part, what you are concerned about. First of all, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, or we call it CBAM. What is CBAM? In simple terms, it means you must disclose your carbon emissions of your products to the EU customers. Your customers then have to pay a carbon price, the so-called carbon tax, based on those emissions. This applies to sectors like iron, steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizer, hydrogen, and in the future, organic chemicals and polymers. Polymers is important because it is a big sector. especially for enterprises in Asia Pacific. And the other thing I would like to highlight is that with the name to avoid the so-called tax evasion, actually the European Commission, they set out the CBAM scope, which is wider than many people might expect. For example, the metal cap of a perfume bottle may also be subject to CBAM. Okay, now let's see two statements. Right, these two statements are both from the simplification package released by the European Parliament. The first statement, on one hand, 90% of importers exempted from CBAM. The other statement is, despite these exemptions, 99% of carbon dioxide emissions from covered goods were well addressed by CBAM. These two statements, they look contradictory to each other, but actually it is a perfect example of two things can both be true. Let me explain to you why. The 90% exemption applies to small EU importers, but the hard truth is, for manufacturers and traders, like many of you in this webinar, are in the 99% group. Why? Maybe I put it this way. Can you guarantee all of your customers will not expand the business or exceed the threshold? You cannot. As long as you have one EU customer that is subject to CBAM, you will be regulated. What does being regulated mean for you? It means you must perform carbon data collection, you do the quantification and reporting according to the EU methodologies and data requirements. Just for your information, the EU methodology and data requirements, they are the most stringent and the leading standards across the globe. So if you have never conducted any exercises on carbon emission quantification, you are facing a game of from level 0 to level 9 at least, or maybe 10, right? And then after that, after the quantification, you also need an EU accredited verifier to verify your data before you submit the data to your customer in the EU, such that your customers can fulfill the compliance requirement. Each of these steps is mandatory. That's why I have had a view that the biggest impact of this CBAM mechanism is not the carbon tax itself. It is the cost and difficulty of compliance that is the most critical part. If you cannot provide the required data, actually you face a serious risk. Your customer may refuse to buy from you to avoid their own compliance problems. So this CBAM system is going to hit you hardly. Let's move on to the next topic about CSDDD. On CSDDD, in short, it requires large EU companies to ensure their global suppliers meet EU standards on human rights and environment. So a few elements here. The direct liability undertaker may not be you if you are not a European company. It is the company in the EU. On the other hand, what this regulation requires is the compliance outside of EU of the suppliers. Okay, so it is a system of collective responsibility. If the EU company supplier, say in Asia, has an issue, the EU company will be held accountable under this system, right? We have recently seen delays in this regulation, but will it be implemented? Let's use common sense and look at these two statements, right? One argument, this is from a European advocacy group, that for large EU companies, the compliance cost of EU CSDDD is negligible, just 0.009% of revenues on average. The other view is of the same organization, right? The package delaying CSDDD is a significant setback that jeopardizes the EU leadership. Let's do some calculation. Let's see what does the 0.009% mean. Let's assume a European group that reported 43 billion euro in revenue for 2024, right? 0.009% means only 4 million euro. It sounds quite small, right? Whereas, let's take a look at the penalty for not complying with CSDDD. For this group, if they fail to comply, the penalty will be 5%, will be up to 5% of their global revenue. The global revenue, as I said, it is 43 billion. So for this company, the penalty could be 2.1 billion euro. That's a 4 million. We have 4 million costs, and then a potential penalty of 2.1 billion. Common sense suggests it does not make sense, right? But I will tell you, both of these statements can be true, because the real cost is not on this EU company, but on their suppliers. Let's calculate this. Imagine this company has 5,000 suppliers in China. That is a very conservative estimate for this type of a company, right? If each supplier spends 40,000 euro to meet CSDDD requirements, that is a total cost of 200 million euro. If we have 100 of this size of companies in the EU, what is the cost? It is 20 billion costs on the suppliers, right? So as you can see, we have 20 billion costs. And what does this 20 billion cost go? A lot of them, they go to the consulting firm and certification firms in the EU, right? So when we see these numbers, we can tell that there is a very, very powerful economic incentive and global trade impact for the EU. And with these, they will push these regulations forward. I don't disagree that these rules are for the benefits of environment and people. I don't disagree. But in my opinion, it is also true that CSDDD is about setting the rules of global trade, which all of you will have to comply with and pay a cost for. Now you might hear that the CSDDD will only be formally applied from 2027, but I would like to remind you, make no mistake, do not let this date give you a false sense of security. The reality on the ground is that the European mega groups are not waiting for this. They have been building these due diligence systems for years to de-risk their supply chains. The requirements are already there. In the coming 1 year or two, you will receive more and more of these requests from your largest customers in the EU. They are preparing now, and they expect you to be prepared now. So finally, we see these complex, costly, and unavoidable regulations. This brings us to a critical question. Why have so many governments pledged to work on carbon neutrality and promote ESG? Because when compliance like this becomes inevitable, the only smart approach is to shift our perspective and take real action. We must move from seeing this as a burden to seeing this as a partnership to progress. This is a challenge. It is also a major opportunity for all of you. In the future, the EU customers will choose suppliers not just for product quality, but also for compliance and for low carbon performance. So how do we take action? A critical first step is quantification. This is the fundamental basis for the compliance. Your customers and the authorities will need to see the numbers and verify the numbers before they engage you on business. And in closing, these EU regulations are reshaping global supply chain. By understanding these rules, embracing the challenge, and focusing on real quantifiable actions, we can turn compliance into a competitive advantage. I hope the information provided so far is helpful for you. Thank you. Back to you, Tom.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. And very interesting, very useful as you hoped information. I think everyone will get a lot out of that. I mean, it sort of feels menacing in a way, but I mean, there's no arguing that this will have an impact on everyone, and it's not like businesses outside of the EU are going to be able to do well. Of course, lobbying exists, but there's not much that you can do about it. So it is well to be prepared. Now, there are some comments I can see in the webinar chat saying it's quite costly. I would also maybe quite difficult if you've never really had to do it before, to do things like carbon emission verification, or and as we know that like supply chain audits for social compliance can be difficult as well. Are there things that companies, especially smaller companies, is there a way they can pool resources or collaborate with either their suppliers or with peers at their level, do you think, to kind of make that a bit easier, or maybe even cheaper, which will be what some people would think about? Are there sort of maybe institutions that they can turn to for help with that?
Maybe I put it this way. So for carbon management or carbon quantification, whatever you call it, it is not easy. It is really not easy. Many mega companies, they still suffer from carbon management as well. On the other hand, it is not that difficult as well. So I think before you have a sense of how it is, let's just take action and do the work. And one of the best approach is actually CBAM, because under CBAM, the EU Commission, they have worked out all kinds of tools, templates, etc., to help enterprises to implement it. Let's use those tools to help you build up the basic elements for carbon management.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
That's my thought. Yeah.
If there's one thing we can say about the EU civil service, they do like to make websites and information packs about things. So there is plenty of information out there. And so one other follow-up question is that, I mean, we saw the change to the CBAM went to the 50-ton threshold. We've seen a bit of movement on implementation times due to some systems taking a while to get working. Do you think there are likely to be other significant changes before, well, in the near future? And what do you think they might be if you think we're going to see any majorly different regime come in for these?
There are, maybe I put it in three perspectives. First of all, there will be some simplification going on. There will be, but those simplification measures, I don't think they matter a lot, because this is also a very, very significant concept that you should understand, people should understand about carbon markets, carbon emission. The fundamental rule in this is 1 ton must be 1 ton. The carbon emission in company A should technically equal to the carbon emission of company B if they are also both are 1 ton, right? So this concept would lead to a lot of work in practice, especially compliance work, to make sure 1 ton must be 1 ton. With this, I don't think the technical part can really be simplified. Otherwise, the data quality cannot be guaranteed at all, right? So the second point I would like to mention is that don't underestimate the work to come, and don't just do the basic level stuff, get into details. That's the second point I would like to mention. The third one is that the most significant change about CBAM going forward is the scope extension. They will cover more sectors. And one of the most important one is organic chemicals and polymers, plastic. This will hit the Asia Pacific market a lot. Yes.
All right, something to look forward to, and certainly food for thought. Thank you, Richard. All right, well, we'll let you take
no problem
for a little while, and go over to the. Oh, actually, could you close your PowerPoint, Richard, so we can have the screen back?
Yeah, sure.
And
sorry.
no, that's all right. And let's bring Valerio onto the screen. If you could turn on your mic. Fascinating presentation. I'm sure you'll agree, Valerio. And yes, so Valerio will be talking to us about beyond ESG, from metrics to meaning in a new business environment. Not totally sure why I read that out loud, because you can all see it already. But yes, when you're ready, Valerio, if you could turn on your microphone, we'll let you take the stage. Thank you.
Yes, turning off my microphone. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Richard. Thank you, Tom. Now we're gonna look at similar things, but from a different perspective. We're gonna look at what is the underlying political reasons behind these developments. Other ways to influence this new regulation popping up, or this actually new approach to business, and then we're gonna look at what are the best way to address these challenges, but I would say as well opportunities. I want to start a little bit with an introduction of who we are. I mean, as Tom mentioned, we're a public affairs firm. We support our clients in public policy, media training, and market access, generally speaking. We present all over Asia Pacific, and we have presence in Africa, Middle East, and Europe. Now, this is just a quick intro. Now, I wanna take a step back. I mean, and look at what is the ESG? You know, it's like everybody ESG. It's like we're going environmental, social, and governance. And it's basically a new trend. It started 10, 15, 20 years ago, but we started now to look at it in more details, looking at it embedded in company strategy. We hear a lot about it. And this is used to manage risk and opportunities, mainly related to sustainability. Now, why it is critical now? It's critical now because society has changed. And hence, once society changes, then regulators usually tend to reflect what happens in the civil society. I mean, it's a moving element, I would say, because I mean, when we started, it was very much on metrics, specific metrics, which clearly are still there. They're very important, but now are complemented, let's put it this way, by purpose and meaning. And meaning, that's why a lot of companies, they go just beyond the metrics, and they look at meaningful impact on society and the community as a whole. Now, Richard touched it earlier, and it's a very, very, very important point, how geopolitics is impacting the ESG. There's clearly power dynamics. There is between the big players, United States, China, Europe. Clearly, I mean, that it can be leveraged upon sometimes as a non-tariff barrier type. So there's a huge debate now on what is happening. Although let aside the tariff, which is a topic that is a hot topic, but also on sustainability and the regulatory framework, which can be perceived and considered as a non-tariff barrier. Having said that, the world, there are different approaches. There is different type of commitments. There is different type of economic developments. We're gonna look at a few of these in a map, in a very simple map. I mean, later in the presentation. But this creates a bit of uncertainty, and I want to go back to one of the points that we had earlier on the chit chat. I mean, we are still in a very fluid type of situation. There is different type of standards across geographically as well. Although we're moving towards the same direction, still there is not a firm framework where everybody can look at it in a consistent manner. So we have Europe, we have Asia, we have United States, and so on and so forth. And this clearly, it enhances complexity for the business, especially for global businesses. I mean, they do business in Asia, it's one way. They do business in the States, then there's another regulatory framework, there is Europe, and so on and so forth. Clearly, there is some actions that can be taken on this, i.e. being ahead of the curve, but it's extremely expensive. And most of the time is limited to bigger companies or bigger organizations. I mean, going back on the fragmentation, the global fragmentation, a little bit that we're looking at. I mean, we have countries which are in a little darker green. They emphasize the climate action and to a certain extent social justices as well. Then we have a little bit lighter green, the more climate focus and subject to political shift, as we see in the United States. The United States is a little bit swinging depending on the administration, but also looking at the business side of things. So they want to ensure there's a kind of alignment sometimes between the private sector, businesses, and regulators. While in Europe, there's a bit of a dichotomy of businesses are not extremely happy of, let's say, the Green New Deal, the circular economy initiative. So while in these countries with the lighter green, and we see United States, you see China, there's a little bit more alignment between businesses and regulator. And then we have countries which are very much resource-based economies. They are different stage of the economic development, which most of the time are also treated differently when dealing with the EU, with United States, with China, and this is given by the different economic infrastructure and the different level of economic development. I mean, just to give you a bit of an idea, here we got the Green New Deal in Europe. We got the dual carbon initiative in China, which look at neutral status by 2060, if I'm not wrong, but peak emission in up to 2030. So they have different timelines most of the time. It's a very complex situation, and I don't see any homogenization or uniformity getting literally in a short period of time. And again, there is politics influence on it. There is businesses influence on it at the same time. Even the Green New Deal and the circular economy plan in Europe, it's under scrutiny, given the swing in the parties at the EU level. So there's a lot of unease in a lot of countries. Clearly, compliance stays there, but there's a lot of unease. There's a lot of discussion about pushing back certain date. But this is driven by the political discussion. Now, I mentioned earlier, they're moving from metrics to meanings. I mean, it's very much going beyond just the numbers. A lot of companies, they try to address the issues from a purpose perspective. And again, this is very complex. It requires a massive engagement with the public community in a very politically charged world. I mean, we've seen what's happening today. Now it seems like, and this is one of the big challenges that we see today: the politicization of ESG. I mean, the objective is clearly good. I mean, it's for the better of society, but there is a political charge to the discussion, which creates, to a certain extent, some extreme. And this is the environment where companies are actually operating. Now, why it is important? It is important because society, it is changing. Clearly, it is important because you want to ensure that you have a healthy business, you want to be compliant, you want to expand the business, but that's not enough. I mean, we're living in a world where the consumers, and I believe all of us here believe and tries to do what's best for the community and the society. So that goes beyond just the metrics and the numbers. There's a certain level of actually a very high level of public interest on what companies are doing, and again, it's not just the consumer itself, but even the company within their DNA, they have it within their employees. They have it, and it's changing the paradigm, I would say. I'm trying to now what is happening in the real world. I tried to take a snapshot of two major corporation, Unilever, which everybody is I believe is familiar with. I mean, they embedded it in their strategy. They want to source 100% sustainably. They want to reduce greenhouse gases by 50%. They want to eliminate virgin plastic. This is extremely complex. Polymer plastic is not just one thing; it's different polymers. So extremely complex endeavor. But they embarked on the journey. They are responding to geopolitical and society changes across. They invest in legal communities. They have CSR plan, which is complementing what they're doing from an ESG, from a pure technical perspective. They're looking at all their supply chain, obviously. I mean, they're looking at gas emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. I mean, which is an extremely complex exercise. I mean, just the scope 1 is what the enterprise directly emits. The scope 2 is indirect, so through their suppliers, and the scope 3 is in the full supply chain. I mean, clearly, what they're doing puts them in a good position to engage, to align, but also engage with regulators and authorities to look at what and how the future could look like. And clearly, it gives a competitive advantage vis-a-vis the consumers. Same story for Samsung. I mean, they very much, they have in their plan, they're committed to achieve net zero carbon. They have plans for renewable energy in the operation by 2025, which I believe they must have they must have already achieved. Clearly, there's a lot of focus on eco-friendly product design. And again, also for Samsung, they're responding to geopolitical changes. They're looking at how Europe, United States, China, and the major markets are regulating from an ESG perspective. As I mentioned earlier, there's the new Green Deal, the circular economy plan. In Korea, they have the New Deal, or Korea in the United States, they have to look at the EPA clean power plan. But although the United States now it's very much in a fluid type of status from an ESG regulatory framework perspective. Clearly, again, fortified impact, the mitigating supply chain risk. There's a different perception by the consumers. So there's a lot of positive aspect. I'm not going to hide the fact that there are costs behind that, but clearly there is positive impact to the business. Now there's a lot of opportunities here. I mean, there's new markets, which, I mean, at the end of the day, there's competitive advantage for early movers, but also for movers which are aligned with the regulatory framework. Clearly, it enables to strengthen the relationship with the stakeholders, both at business level throughout the supply chain, as well as from a commercial standpoint with the consumer and with the public society. Now, in the situation where we are now, I mentioned it earlier, there's regulatory fragmentation. There is a direction, absolutely there is a direction, but clearly there's no, I would say, an agreement on how to achieve the final objective. And this is creating a lot of tension, which at the end of the day can also be leveraged upon as opportunities if there is enough engagement by the enterprises with the regulator. Clearly, I mean, supply chain disruption, I mean, and this I refer to Richard, is extremely complex, especially for business in Asia, to market now and in the future is costly, it's complex to be compliant and market in the future with the EU. As a matter of fact, and as I mentioned earlier, some of those policies they might be considered as non-tariff barrier, and obviously some of them are. But having said that, there's a lot of unease also within the EU. There's a lot of unease amongst EU businesses. A lot of jurisdiction in the EU, they're trying to re-engage with Brussels, they're trying to mitigate the impact, they're trying to look at the timeline. So the discussion, the game is still on, the discussion is still open. And I think what is very strategic and is very important is actually be part of this discussion. Now, what are some recommendations? Clearly, embed ESG and political awareness in the strategies. Major corporations, they're already doing it, but I believe that everybody at different level, at different stages, they should do it. Clearly, I mean, when we talk about ESG strategies, it also means ensuring compliance, ensuring the understanding of the regulations, and so on and so forth. So, but also looking at what are the risks, the geopolitical risks. The important thing is to be a step ahead of the curve. In this, it's important to engage in a dialogue with a multi-stakeholder dialogue. It's not just the government, but it's NGOs, industry coalition, and this will help to drive and shape the business environment for the future. Having said that, a company has to be nimble. I mean, and this goes back to the first point, whereby incorporating geopolitical risks and ESG strategy will provide the company with enough understanding and knowledge to adjust to different policies and to look at potentially even anticipate it. And then as another point is in reporting is important to use credible reporting frameworks. I mean, that is really is obvious. I mean, there's no question about it. But also it's important to ensure that this is incorporated within the overall strategy of the company, because this will influence then at the end of the day how the business will be conducted in the future. Now, I'm never tired to say that we need to look at long term. They have to be meaningful rather than just superficial or as they call it now, greenwashing type of initiative, which they might be just increase the cost, but not the impact on the business. But it's extremely important to look at it from a long-term perspective, to be able to incorporate the risk and the regulatory analysis as well into the ESG strategies. So it's not just the compliance element, but it's also looking at where the next regulation will come, because we are living in a, as I said, in a fluid world, and it's regulation after regulation. Sometimes could be improvement, sometimes maybe the intended consequences might not be consequences of the regulation. It might not be the one that will enhance sustainability and facilitate the business. So it's important to have a long-term approach. Those are strategic recommendations. This is not just the day-to-day. It has to be embedded within the company, but with a long-term view. And when we talk about long-term view, it's one thing is the next election, one thing is the next 2 or 3 elections in the next generation. Now, just to have a very brief and quick conclusion, clearly, as I said, ESG is intertwined with geopolitics, with public society, with consumers, and it's not something that we can avoid anymore for 2 reasons. But it's not just it is not just from a compliance perspective, regulatory perspective. It's also from a commercial element that ESG is actually important. There is a shift. I mean, rather than a shift, there is I would say, I mean, the ESG, the traditional ESG metrics, they've been complemented with purpose and initiatives that have societal values, and they're complementing what the company is actually doing from a let's say emission or circularity perspective. Now, we discuss a lot, and I think that this is the most critical element, the greater regional divergence, I mean, that we find across the world. I mean, it is important, again, to engage in a dialogue, to engage in industry association, to engage with the regulators. It might sound, they might look far, they might sound difficult, but at the end of the day, most of the regulators are there to listen. And they very much welcome the dialogue. What is very important here is timing, clearly. And I go back to what I mentioned earlier, to embed the strategy, geopolitical risk, and long-term view. And clearly, I mean, the use of technology, this is something goes without saying. It's digitalization, and AI will definitely increase transparency, reduce cost, and help in implementing the strategy and being compliant with the regulation in the jurisdiction that the company is operating. I try to be as concise as possible. I'll be glad to address any question you might have, and if I do not have the answer now, I will be glad to get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerio. Yeah, a very rich and insightful presentation. And I think early on, someone in the comments said, I'll have to watch this more than once because it'll be impossible to take in all in one go. I think that might be true, especially here. If I could ask you, Valerio, to kind of talk a little bit more about one thing that you mentioned towards the end there. That's about the frameworks such as GRI, and I've already forgotten the names of the others. Could you spell out a little bit about how those might work in practice?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's okay. Everybody is very much familiar with ISO standards. I mean, those ISO standards, everybody's familiar with that. They're pretty much the same. It's global standards and so on and so forth. Now, when we're looking at this, the GRI, so the Global Reporting Initiative, the SASAB, I mean, clearly those are the SASAB Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. Those are the recognized or the most prominent standards that any businesses can use to file their ESG report. So it's also important to understand. I mean, now the situation is a lot clearer. I mean, if you were looking at 3, 4, 5 years ago, I mean, there was also a big debate, which standards should we look at in order to do compliance reporting for ESG? Now the situation starts to be a little bit more streamlined. And there are there is a certain level of harmonization. So this is why those standards are important, and those are literally the most prominent one.
Thank you. That's good. So plenty for people to follow up with there. But yes, overall, thank you for that presentation. I think it's a good point, well made, as they say, to point out that the metrics are one thing, but really it's the meaning of GSE that's the outcome that's important. You know, numbers systems can always be gamed, and I think everyone is aware of that. I suppose actually that is the question: is how do you communicate when you are doing the right thing, when you are doing good things in ESG? How do you communicate that to skeptical stakeholders who may not believe you? I don't know. Yeah, what is the approach to not necessarily being accused of greenwashing, but of maybe sort of demonstrating that there is real impact behind your actions as a company?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's absolutely, and to me, really, standards and compliance, it has to be complemented by meaning. I mean, they do not exclude each other. There's not, when I mention shifts, people is not moving out of compliance or doing different things. They're there, but they give meaning to it. Now, a lot of the major corporations, and we've been with our firm, we've been assisting them. They go beyond that, just the metrics. So they try to, most of the time, they also try to tailor make programs around it. But what is very important is the dialogue. Is the dialogue between the private sector, the public sector, and the regulators. That's how, so there's a certain element of education and communication to the outside world of what the company is doing, and in layman terms, because a lot of people, they might not be extremely knowledgeable about some of the things. So when the community of the society does not understand much, then there is the risk of, oh, that's greenwashing. So communication is important. Adopting the right standards, that is extremely important, and explaining it to the society, the community, and the regulator. Those are extremely important elements.
That's cool. Yes, communication as always. And speaking of communication, let's transition seamlessly into our Q&A section. So thank you for that, Valeria. Richard, you're back online with us, I believe, and I think Valerio, I'll let you relax a little bit after your presentation, and we've got a few questions here. I think Richard will want to take on. Hang on, so bear with me a moment. I've got the Q&A, but I noticed some people have also been posting questions in the general chat, so I'm going to try and get to those as well. Let me go. I'll tell you what, I'll go right back to the very first question that we got posted, because that seems fair. And an anonymous attendee has asked, do all plastic products fall under the category of polymers? And is there any estimated implementation date of CBAM, whatever we're calling it, for polymers? Richard, do you have an insight on that?
So for the time being, I think the European Commission is still assessing this. Around end of this year or early next year, there should be a report to be released by the European Commission. And they will assess the sector and serve and provide a proposal on what's next on C-band extension. So we will have the answers then. But because, as I mentioned, the impact on organic chemical and polymers is so significant, that's why we can foresee there will be a lot of disputes in the parliament. And I believe it is going to be a very dramatic thing to come. So there will be there is and there will be a lot of uncertainty of this. I can't give you the answer for now.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, yes, if we thought that the initial tranche of CBAM things was difficult, this one will be even more so, I would expect. Yeah.
Yes.
On a similar topic, we have one from okay, I'm gonna Ainul Bisri writes, how will the 50-ton threshold for exemptions really affect small and occasional importers, or truly affect, I should say? So that's a good question. We know it will have presumably some price impacts and things, but what are the key impacts going to be? I suppose that's the real question there.
I think for SMEs in the EU, it is kind of a dilemma. On the one hand, you think you are exempt from CBAM. On the other hand, before you ask for the data from your suppliers, before that, you don't know whether you are below the threshold. That's why for unless you are really small, otherwise I would suggest you do it as a mega group and you ask your suppliers for the stuff. That would be a more conservative approach. I will strongly recommend that. Yeah.
Good insights. And a second question from the same viewer. Well, I say a second question. This to me reads a little bit like two questions, but we'll go for it anyway. And that is, I mean, to be fair, this is a good question. Can environmental integrity be maintained while exempting 90% of importers? That's the question at the heart of all this, isn't it? And what will be the consequences for those included in the 99% group?
So actually there are two questions here. For the first question, actually, the thing is, maybe I clarify it a bit more about this. So for the manufacturers outside of the EU, because they are not sure whether their customers are subject to CBAM or they can enjoy the exemption. They don't know. That's why they have to undertake the CBAM related exercise anyway. That's one thing. The other thing is, for these manufacturers or even the traders, once they have one customer requiring the EU CBAM data and stuff, what they will need to do will be the same. 100 customers or one customer, what you will need to do is the same. That's the logic why the European Commission think that even though we have 90% exemption, 99% of the carbon emission would be monitored. I think that's the answer for question one. For question two, what will be the consequences for Asia Pacific facilities? I think, as I mentioned, I think very likely you will have to undertake according to the EU CBAM requirements anyway. So my suggestion is do it now. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Oh, we've got a couple of short questions here that I can answer. That's a rare treat. One is, where do we find the link to the survey? That is in a while after this Q&A. It'll be put up on the screen for you to scan. And will the slides be shared with us? I don't know so much about the slides themselves, but we will be uploading a recording of this webinar later on, and you'll get an alert when that happens, so you can scrub back through and check out all the slides then. All right, let me close that window for now. Sorry again, bear with me. I've got a lot of screens open here now. There's a lot going on backstage. Let me see. Okay. Oh yeah, so here's one from Teresa Dizon, who asks, what are the regulatory frameworks or policies that apply to small SMEs in Europe when it comes to sustainability? So yeah, are there, we know that, for example, CBAM exempts certain sizes. Are there sustainability regulations that small and medium enterprises have to follow in Europe? Richard, I don't know if you know the answer to this one, or Valeria.
I think this is a very, very good questions. I think for each regulation in the EU, I think that they have very, very specific scope, targeted company, etc. So technically, you should refer to the specific regulations, the provision, etc. But on the other hand, even if you are an SME in the EU, I would suggest that now that as Valerio has also mentioned that ESG is not just compliance, it is also a mega trend. So even you may enjoy the exemption, why not just do it if the cost is not too high? So that would be my suggestion. And we have a lot of more and more cases where the companies, when they do well in sustainability, the sustainability efforts were converted into business success. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a reward to a certain degree, I think. Yeah. Right. Oh, here's one for Valerio, if you're willing. So Samuel Balestra writes, there seems to be some buzz about AI and sustainability because the data centers made to keep AI going are very energy demanding. That is true. Those server farms are they run pretty hot. So do you think the EU will lower the AI train with as in, kind of put the dampers on it with future regulations, such as limiting products that have AI functions?
That's a very, very, very good question. I mean, it's and what the EU is doing now is trying to balance innovation with sustainability. There is the global AI race between EU, China, United States, mega computers, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are not specifically now any regulation that has to do with energy consumption or emissions related to AI. At this moment in time, there is nothing has been developed. But I believe it's plausible that the EU could encourage eventually or mandate some greener AI type of product. I mean, and what I mean by that, I mean, they might look at limiting energy intensive activities. I mean, clearly there's going to be a lot of energy consumption related to AI development. They might ask mandatory disclosure. So it's plausible. At this moment in time, there is not, but it's absolutely plausible. I mean, I don't even believe that it's going to be that far ahead. But I tend to believe it will not be too stringent, especially at the beginning, because we are in a very tight race between supercomputers, quantum computers, all related to AI. And this is really a strategic advantage perceived, and it is a strategic advantage for United States, for China, for EU. So regulation eventually will come, but I don't think it's plausible. Eventually will come. I don't think it's going to be too far ahead. Now the focus is very much on ethics, transparency, but spot on. Great question. And I think is a discussion that is already ongoing, by the way. We need to see how it's going to develop.
Still, stay tuned for that one. You can always tell a good question when it's hard to answer. Excellent. Satyaval Rao asks, I'm not sure which of the two might answer this one, or maybe you both want to. While we talk of coming regulations, what about supplier side preparations? How does one assure that what is being done is genuine? Yeah, maybe this is one for, I don't know. Richard, perhaps, do you have any input on that? How do we,
maybe I take
how do you
this one.
verify the verification? Yeah.
Yeah, so for EU CBAM, apparently there is a verification mechanism, very stringent mechanism. So you need a accredited EU verifier to verify the data and stuff. So there has already been an assurance mechanism. For EU CSDDD, I think because the direct impacts are on the mega groups in the EU, and they will implement it in their procurement policies, and that those policy actually affects the suppliers across the globe. So they will embed all kinds of assurance mechanism in this. For example, they will require the suppliers to find a third party, probably an international certification firm, to conduct a supplier audit or supplier due diligence on the manufacturing facilities. That would be the approach that those mega groups adopt to ensure everything is genuine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. And I think we're going to maybe just one more person's questions before we have to round things off. This one, actually, I think this is a two-parter, one part for each guest, actually. So I'll pitch part one to Valeria, I think, which is from Marta Quaresma, who asks, how do you see EU sustainability compliance shaping industries that have complex global supply chains, such as fashion or textiles?
Well, it's already doing it. A lot of those industries, they're being shaped by the regulation, but I believe the greatest impact will actually be in the sourcing jurisdiction. That's where the major impact will come. I mean, it will drastically change the labor market. It will drastically change the economic infrastructure, which it might be perceived as, from a business perspective, it might be perceived, oh my God, this is extremely tough. But eventually, over the long term, there will be incredible benefits also for the sourcing economies, I would say. So it is definitely already impacting it. The major impact, again, clearly from a consumer perspective, we look at pricing, and pricing, I mean, to have higher prices is never good, but this is sometimes a little price to pay. I mean, that it's the balance, but it's definitely impacting it. I mean, you can see in the manufacturing, you can see in the all supply chain, the labor conditions, economic infrastructure. I mean, this is something that is not going to happen. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's already there. It's a process that has started already. So there is definitely an impact for the good. Although, I mean, it's a bit of a price to pay on it now. So this is the major element on the economy. Then there is another element: how it's going to impact the sector itself. Because there are two impacts. One is on the sourcing jurisdiction, what is going to happen to the economy, and how it's going to impact the sector itself. I mean, clearly, there is some underlying benefit sometimes in this type of regulation, because they will drive technological advancement, technological development. They will drive companies to find solution to certain type of problems. I mean, now there is a huge debate in the fashion industries about new types of material. I mean, sometimes this type of regulation will help the industry in advancing and forcing them to a certain extent even to invest in new types of technology. So there are two type of influences, I would say. One is on the sourcing jurisdiction, so where the product is actually manufactured, and then the other impact is on the sector and the company itself. Having said that, this will create the strongest will survive. I mean, those type of regulation will drive consolidation of industry. That's I mean, it's a fact of life. Smaller companies sometimes they might suffer, but they tend to drive consolidation, because the bigger ones, they will have the resources, the know-how to address it.
Thank you, Valeria. And then for Richard, I'll pass the second part of Martha's question to you, which is, what advice would you give to companies in this kind of highly complex industry, where with changing regulation, another part of their supply chain might suddenly fall under? How do they stay ahead of the EU sustainability compliance trends?
I think for textile and fashion sector, of course, this also applies to other sectors. I think that there are three key pillars for the preparation. One is climate and carbon. That is one. We talk about it a lot in this webinar. The second one is circular economy, where you source your raw materials, how you recycle the stuff, and all of this require one point that Valerio just mentioned. It is the chain of custody. So you know what comes from where and goes to where. That is very, very important. That's the second thing. The third thing here is actually the human rights stuff. This is a significant risk. It could be, and there have been, I would say, contradictory regulations in different jurisdictions. So we need to be careful about that as well. This is also one of the key areas to cover in the EU CSDDD. So yeah, these three key pillars are very, very important. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And I know I said I'd do just one more, but we've had a few more questions come in last minute. So if you don't mind sticking around for a little bit longer, I'll ask you these as well. Let's see. So one from Limboy asks, how do you think, what do you think of the increasing possibility of greenwashing when practicing ESG, because it's a trend that's in demand? And is there any way to prevent it? This seems like a public relations question, so I'll throw that to Valerio. What do you think about that?
Sorry, I couldn't hear very well. Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. It's what do you think about the increasing possibility of greenwashing when practicing ESG because of the market trend? So basically, because it's more in demand, it's going to be more tempting to greenwash, isn't it? And how do you prevent that?
Good question. Good question. Now, it's okay. First of all, I mean, it all sets into the values of the company. So the intrinsic value of the enterprise that is implementing the ESG strategies. So that's the key element. I mean, it's a value system of the company itself. Now, having said that, what is risky is perceived greenwashing. That is because the value obviously might be good, the intention might be good, the strategy is the right one, but still it can be perceived as a greenwashing. Oh, you're not really doing it right or doing what you're supposed to do. And again, on this one, it's education and communication. So it's important to go public in the right way, in the right venues, with the right stakeholders. This is key. I mean, it's key not only to avoid any perception of greenwashing, but it's also key to ensure that the enterprise is part of the dialogue. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about it. In the early years, there was, I mean, the phenomena of greenwashing was a lot more common. Also because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there were not clear standards. Everybody was trying to do something. Sometimes, even with the best intention, maybe it was not perceived or it was not yielding the intended results. But clearly is about, it depends on the value system. Nowadays, greenwashing is a very I wouldn't say rare phenomenon. It is still there, but it's a lot more controllable, given by the fact that there are certain standards that the enterprises need to comply with. So standards is also good, but communication is key, because it's not just about what we do. It's about how we do it, but we also have to communicate in the right venue with the right stakeholders. So that's what I think is extremely important. Now, in the case of a greenwashing situation, again, transparency and communication, it is actually key to overcome it most of the time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And sorry, if I can add one thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, it has to go throughout the supply chain, because sometimes, I mean, we live in a very complex environment where supply chains are extremely complex. So it's not just about the final product, but there's all the other actors. So the communication, which is very important, and the compliance, it has to go throughout all the steps of the supply chain. That is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, let's see. We have a very interesting question from Noor, who writes, I mean, one that I don't entirely understand myself. I think it's a Richard question. And she writes, in addition to big companies like Unilever and Samsung, as mentioned by Valeria, how can subnational development banks serve as catalysts for implementing ESG frameworks at regional or municipal levels, and what distinguishes their contributions from those of global companies? Richard, do you have any thoughts on that? How these kind of bodies can play a role?
I think for actually for these organizations, I understand they have some financing arrangement for enterprises who would like who would go for example, energy transition, etc., etc. So I think companies may look at their websites and try to take a look whether there is any of these programs that you can participate. On the other hand, I think the easier way would be that you talk to the local government and let the local government to help you get this funding from these development banks. That would be easier, according to my previous experience. Yes.
I see some nodding from Valeria. Do you want to jump in with any comments on that?
No, absolutely. Spot on. I mean, it's like Asia Development Bank. It's now they basically, any financing that they do for project, they need to comply with certain sustainability criteria. So it's absolutely. I mean, and it's ADB, could be IMF, could be World Bank, but as Richard mentioned, is an extremely complex and time-consuming exercise for funding, which it might take like 2 to 3 years. So it's usually the first approach is looking at local jurisdiction, local government, which most of the time they have like tax breaks and financing capabilities in the context of sustainability. Absolutely. I've been working on projects involving development banks. So yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. All right, now we have a couple more questions in the barrel, but I'm afraid that really is all we have time for now. So it remains only for me to, well, first of all, of course, we must say special thanks to our panelists. Hey, we've got a slide for it. Richard Lynn and Valeria D'Angelo. Yes, thank you so much. We literally couldn't have done this without you. And your participation has been invaluable. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do that and to share your expertise with our audience. And of course, you can lose the slide now. We need to thank our audience, and one of the ways we're going to thank the audience is with this QR code. This is the much awaited survey link. If you scan that, you'll go to a little website with a short survey. Fill that out, and if you're in the first 20, and I think if you also qualify for something else, you can get a $10 Amazon coupon to spend on something I hope worthwhile and fulfilling. But it's really up to you. You could also blow it all on chocolates. That's fine. So what else do I need to mention? I also need to mention that we will have more SEB Sourcing Elite Board 30-year anniversary content coming up. Some of it will be online in the coming months, but the very next thing will be part of a strand within the Global Sources Summit at our trade shows in Hong Kong in October. So if you want to see the next SEB seminar, that's going to be a physical thing happening with real human beings in Hong Kong. So we hope to see you there at Asia World Expo. That is all from me. Valeria, Richard, thank you so much. And I will see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.